Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, bringing you podcast 113 here at the Tavern, presented by Hirotaku.com. Patrons of the Tavern, I got a gift for you, and it's still Valentine's Day. I have brought a guest onto the show, and dude, introduce yourself.
Hey, it's Raptor back again. I'm starting to make semi-regular appearances again.
Yes, and I know I'm overjoyed about it, and I just hope our fans can get that excited.
I'll tell you what I'm overjoyed over. That second episode of Dino Charge.
Yes, that is something that is also being covered at the tavern. But Raptor, I brought you in for something a little bit more thoughtful, or at least thought-provoking, I think.
Oh, okay.
Now, for a lot of you guys who've been following my videos regularly, I did podcast 105 talking about the Ninja Zords and how I didn't understand them and the way they flowed and things like that. I do want to go ahead and point out that since that particular podcast, one of the producers of the show did state that they were meant to be disconjointed, basically. You know, drag in a dump truck and a train, that's all supposed to be normal. That was the entire intention behind it. But I think more significantly, other than my misunderstanding of what the Zord dynamic was supposed to be for this upcoming season, is
the dynamic was supposed to be no dynamic.
There's none. It is a complete mismatch, yes. So, which again, I found out after I did the video, if only I had found that earlier. But Raptor, what happened was I had gotten one comment based on a comment that I had made when I brought up the fact that the White Ranger had a dog for a Zord. I pretty much brought up the fact that I thought it was very sexist of the creators to give the White Ranger such a weak Zord in comparison to her male counterparts. Because if you look at it, the Red Ranger has a ninja robot.
A humanoid, yeah.
A humanoid ninja, yep. And the Blue Ranger has a dragon, and as we found out, Star Ninja is going to have himself a bison buggy thing. It turns into a giant cowboy. And what I have noticed is if we actually look out through the entirety of Power Rangers and even a little bit before within the annals of Super Sentai, because this is where it originates, there seems to be this history of giving our female characters less than desirable and less than interesting Zords throughout Sentai and Power Rangers run. So Raptor, you and I are going to just kind of analyze a couple of examples here, what we're talking about how the females are not getting the most interesting Zords out there, and how, in a way, it does seem a little bit sexist. And to start out, Raptor, I believe you do have something for us.
Oh, right, yeah. So, since Barkeep ran into the accusation that he was misusing the word sexist, we're just going to use the Wikipedia definition of sexist as our basis of comparison or discussion. Sexism, or gender discrimination, is prejudice or discrimination based on a person's sex or gender. Sexist attitudes may stem from traditional stereotypes of gender roles and may include the belief that a person of one sex is intrinsically superior to a person of the other. Now, I think it is that last line that forms the basis of Barkeep and I's objections to some Zords in Power Rangers and Super Sentai that belong to female Rangers.
And the thing is when you look at the history of Zords, I mean, we got some really cool ones. Particularly the Red Ranger ones or the Sixth Ranger ones stand out on their own. But even amongst the Core 5 or Core 3, we got some good ones. Let's take a look at Shinkanger and Samurai, for example. We have the Red Ranger. He has a lion, Blue Ranger dragon, Green Ranger bear. But what does the Pink and Yellow Ranger have? A monkey and a turtle. Now,
yeah, the Ranger who has the element of sky has a turtle.
Which also is very confusing when you think about it. But wouldn't you say, I mean, let's just look at this one example right here. I mean, you got the entire animal kingdom, and you happen to give the two female characters I guess less than vicious, less than powerful animals. Because, I mean, hey, you lived in Montana for a while. We've seen grizzly bears and all that. Those are very intimidating and powerful animals as compared to a non-Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, man. Kind of wish I could... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, so I mean, I was just saying, that I think that's one example there. I mean, what do you have to say about the Shinkanger example?
I think that's completely valid. You have two very strong animals of nature, a mythical monster, and a monkey.
Yeah.
A turtle.
Yeah, and even when we get the Sixth Ranger, whose Zord is basically a giant lobster, well, his at least turns into its own Megazord.
Yeah, exactly. And well, really, that's just something Sixth Rangers get by default these days.
Yeah, but again, how many of these Sixth Rangers actually get a cool Zord like that? And I know we have an example for that, and we're actually going to get to that here in a minute. But I want to go through a list of a couple of other Zords I find interesting.
Yeah, let's just go down the line, because I can think of several, and you can think of several. Let's go back to the beginning of Power Rangers.
Okay, and I know there's some examples pre-Power Rangers, but again, let's go on from here. I mean, we start with Mighty Morphin, and what is...
Zero Ranger.
Yeah, Mighty Morphin.
This is important. The Zero Ranger, Power Rangers differentiation is important in this case.
Absolutely, and also let's make the point that in Zero Ranger, Tiger Ranger was a male. So as cool as the Saber-Tooth Tiger Dino Zord is, it is not inherently a female Zord. It was not designed as that. And there are several other Yellow Ranger characters where that is also the case.
Yes, so what we have is a Pterodactyl Zord who is smaller than the rest. Who, yeah, she flies around and she shoots lasers. However, she forms the breastplate. That mecha forms the breastplate of Daizujin, and so is not even really noticeable on the final assembled mecha.
And when they do form Dragon Zord in battle mode, it's not even part of the combination. So,
yeah, exactly.
In essence, I mean, other than the ability for flight, which was never really utilized as an advantage in Power Rangers, and as far as I know, at this point was not utilized as an advantage in Zoo Ranger, the Pterodactyl Dinozord really doesn't bring anything to the table.
It's a breastplate.
And then actually, as we move on to the second season, which is the Die Ranger adaptation, the Pterodactyl Dinozord technically gets a downgrade in this season. I believe I talked about before on the Die Ranger Zords on how the Firebird is actually slower than the Pterodactyl Dinozord. And,
oh, right. I remember that one. How basically the Thunder Zords were almost completely inferior to the Dinozords in most ways.
Pretty much, yeah. But in this, we get a Zord that's particularly slower. The only thing it can really do is create a tornado, which only knocks people down and forms the belt of the Megazord. So
yeah,
now,
breastplate to belt.
and then, of course, when we get the Mega Tiger Zord, it's used as a weapon. Basically, the idea is using it to hit other people and throwing it at other people. Which also, by the way, to power up, it needs the Tiger Zord to do that. It doesn't do it on its own. So, looking at Kimberly Zords, or these first two seasons right here, the Pink Ranger Zord, the female Zord of the seasons, are pretty much an afterthought. And they're really so similar, and they don't do much, to be honest.
Alright, then let's skip ahead a bit.
Well, I do also want to talk about Mighty Morphin here when
okay,
we talk
yeah,
about...
go for it.
Because remember, there is no counterpart to the Pink Ranger and Kaku Ranger footage. So when we had the introduction of the Shogun Zords, all the Rangers had their own Shogun Zords, except for Kimberly Catherine. And what did she have to do? She had to share a Zord with Tommy. And Tommy was the main pilot. So what you actually get as a visual is the White Ranger standing in the front with the Pink Ranger behind him and by his side. And if that's not sexist, I don't know what is.
Yeah. I mean, granted, I wouldn't exactly call that sexist. I just see that as the writers being boxed into a corner by the Sentai, but yes, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a very unfortunate thing that you're portraying, because let's also keep in mind that the representation of the Pink Ranger within that season was not always the best. She was that damsel in distress pretty much half the season. The other Pink Ranger was the villain, but that's getting into a whole different thing. The point of the matter is she didn't have her own Shogun Zord.
Something worth pointing out, though, is that in the toy line, the white Shogun Zord was pink.
Yes, which, if you all recall my rant on that, I point out the hypocrisy with Bandai of America.
I didn't know that you talked about that one. I thought that you were just reserving that for the purple.
I did. You should definitely go ahead and watch that one.
I listened to it. I just don't remember the part about the Shogun Zords.
Okay. I think we do need to skip forward just a little bit, simply because,
let's skip forward to Lost Galaxy.
Yes, because really for the next few seasons, it's kind of a wash on the Zords, because, I mean, when all your Zords are cars, there really isn't going to be one that's better or worse than the other. And they at least gave Pink Ranger, I think, a compact,
Yeah, exactly. So, Lost Galaxy was something that stood out to me.
Okay.
Because we have a what was the Reds again? I can't believe I forgot that.
Red Ranger was a lion. Yep.
A lion, a condor that's totally a dragon.
Yep.
A gorilla. What did Yellow have again?
A wolf, which again in this season was the male Zord.
A male, and then a kitty. A wild cat, as they said.
Yes, which looks like the most docile creature you've ever seen. And I think the only thing it ever did within the series, as far as an attack, was shoot lasers from its mouth.
Yeah, so, again, we have a mecha designated for the female that's just completely inferior to the rest.
Absolutely. And then we get to Lightspeed Rescue Go-Go 5. Red Ranger gets a fire truck that can punch people. Green Ranger gets a cool helicopter. And what does Pink Ranger get? An ambulance. And the only thing it could do in the series was open up and put other cars in it to safety. Granted, that fits with the theme, but when your vehicle has no offensive or defensive capabilities, I think you're at a severe disadvantage.
Yes, but again, within the context of the series. Okay, so are there any other ones that really stand out to you in between Go-Go 5 and Shinkanger, since that's where we started this discussion?
I think two. They're kind of worth note. One is the Dika Pink or Pink SPD Ranger, whose entire vehicle has the ability to put up a stop sign. Now, granted, in that same season, the Yellow Ranger could shoot lasers, so that's at least something. And then we get to Magi Ranger Mystic Force, where each of the Rangers turns into its own Titan robot, basically. The Red Ranger is based off of a Phoenix, and he's got a cool sword. The Blue Ranger, in this case, has a Trident, which is kind of interesting. Green Ranger is the giant Minotaur with an axe. And the Yellow Ranger is a Garuda, which can fly and use its wings as weapons. The Pink Ranger happens to have the smallest
little bitty
sword,
pixie,
which I believe its greatest accomplishment was turning into a ball in which everybody could bounce around and hit on the enemy.
It's the fact that she's significantly smaller than the rest that makes it bothersome.
Absolutely. I don't need... Now, again, this may be different in Magi Ranger, but with the footage that was at least used in Power Rangers Mystic Force, they didn't really do anything with that Zord again other than turn to a ball. If they had something like she has small weapon or could shoot fairy dust that did something, again, we would have a legitimate argument there. But even this Pink Ranger, and I think it is the Pink Ranger more than, say, whatever her other female counterpart on the team is. Because as we just said with Deca Ranger, Yellow Ranger had a vehicle that could shoot, Pink Rangers just had one to put up a giant stop sign.
Yeah, okay, so actually now I think about it, Go Busters is one that stands out to me.
Oh, yeah, with the rabbit helicopter.
Yeah, again, going back to the female gain, a flying machine, little helicopter, smaller than the other two. So again, it kind of gives the impression of being inferior.
Absolutely, but the fact that it's also a rabbit, I think, is what brings that, because cheetah,
compared to a cheetah and a gorilla.
A lion, and even, again, the other two are beetles, but they are, tanks and a jet. So, or in this case, a crane. So they look superior in that case. I also want to bring up Geki Ranger Jungle Fury, because this is something that's also rather interesting that I think. So when they formed the Jungle Fury Megazord, or the Geki Toja, the Yellow Ranger, I believe, is the left leg. Now, later in the series where they introduce Geki Violet and the Wolf Ranger, he will actually replace his Zord on the Yellow Ranger to be the Wolf Zord. And when he does that, they gain a new weapon, the blade, the crescent blade that the wolf has in its mouth. And every time that the Violet Ranger, or Geki Violet, will take over this Megazord, he will always have the Violet Zord on his leg with the crescent blade that they use as a weapon. Basically pointing out that the Yellow Ranger Zord in that combination is completely superfluous and is not needed for actual
easily
combat.
Replaced, yes.
And that the Violet Ranger's Zord is superior because it has that weapon the Yellow Zord does not.
And then, right down the line, RPM/Go-Onger.
Yeah, now I think
Yellow has the smallest mecha, once again.
I do think that one's kind of a wash because it does shoot missiles from its mouth. And in this same season, we do go ahead and get the Silver Ranger with a jet, which is pretty cool within itself. So I don't think that RPM Go-Onger is as bad as other seasons. But, I think they had other issues with their female characters in their respected seasons. And I've already talked about that, how the women needed the men to save them in RPM.
Yeah.
Let's kind of go ahead, because I also want to go ahead and talk about...
Skip to the series after Go Busters, because you had a good point that you were telling me about beforehand.
Well, actually, we should also talk about Gokaiger and Super Mega Force. And the only reason I want to bring that up is I think you made the point. Repeat your point about the Zords in Gokaiger.
Oh, my point about the Zords and Gokaiger is that they are completely superfluous. They really have no point. They're only used out of formation once, and so it doesn't really matter that what they actually are don't really matter. They're just vehicles, but they're vehicles without theme. But anyways, go into what you were going to say.
Well, I do want to point out that with these Zords, the Red Ranger gets a giant pirate ship, the Blue Ranger gets a jet, the Green Ranger gets a race car, and the Yellow Ranger gets a tractor trailer, and the Pink Ranger gets a submarine, which only goes in water once during the entire series.
Well, granted, all of them were only used once in the entire series.
Twice actually, in the second episode and in the one where they go to the Machine World.
Okay, I forgot the second episode. I was just thinking of the Machine World when they were chasing down Makapan.
Yeah, but of course, again, a submarine and a tractor trailer, I don't think are as... I mean, because even with the Green Ranger, he has a race car. There's a cool factor when you say, my Zord is a race car, or my Zord is a jet. When you say, my Zord is a semi-truck, but not really. It's not as intimidating or as interesting.
Yeah, completely agreed.
All right, but actually, let's get to what I think is very egregious when you actually sit and think about it a little bit. So
Yes.
we get to Kyoryuger, and of course, we have one female, infamously, to start the series off with, and she gets the Triceratops Zord, which...
Granted, was a cool mecha.
Triceratopses are always cool. But also
And it's a drill.
Yes, but her Zord would also get switched out a number of times in favor of another arm attachment. So there's that. But I think
I think that's something. I mean, all of the Zords are prone to getting switched out.
But hers, I think, more especially because at least the Blue Rangers could become a shield and a sword. So, but here's the main point of it. So we know later in the series we get the Kyu Violet, and the grandfather is in there, and he has his Zord, which is basically a submarine, a dinosaur, a giant robot, and a spaceship all combined into one, which is pretty cool. And then he has to pass that on to Yayoi when he's physically unable to actually pilot it himself and become the Violet Ranger. So she gets this cool Zord, but because a man gave it to her. And to add salt to the wound, she doesn't even pilot it the majority of the time. We often see her co-pilot with someone else, and Daigo often takes command of it.
Basically, that thing ended up being another toy for Daigo, because God knows Daigo didn't have enough toys to himself.
And I will also make this point. I actually have that toy, and if you look on the box of most of the other Zords, such as Zakdor, you'll have a picture of the Zord with the Green Ranger on it. If you actually look at the box for the Violet Ranger Zord, the Violet Ranger is not even front and center on the box. It is the Red Ranger who is on there. Which is kind of interesting within itself. And also, let's make this point. Let's look at another powerful female character within Power Rangers. The Sheba Princess, or Princess Sheba / Princess Lauren. They are the rightful Red Rangers, but they don't have any Zords. They have to be given the Zords by Jaden and Takaru, but only after they have gone through all the trials and tribulations to earn those Zords. They are simply given to them. And she doesn't even pilot the Bull Zord. That's something that Jaden does within the series. So she gets something cool, but she doesn't actually utilize it.
So, kind of just like Yayoi.
Exactly. So, when I talk about sexist, I also talk about this idea that these two female Rangers get some of the coolest Zords that we've ever seen. The Bull and the Peleazon. Peleazon, I can never pronounce that name right.
Peleazon, I believe.
Yes. They get these cool Zords, but they're not thought of as, one, earning them the way the males did, that they are actually passed down to them, and they are not thought of as the main pilots of these Zords. And yes, I know Yayoi had to gain the trust of her Zord, but again, it was his first, and she eventually got it. So, I think in that terms, when they are given powerful Zords, it's not 100% ownership theirs.
Okay, yeah, that's putting it perfectly.
Yeah, and Raptor, give me your overall thoughts of what do you think about female Zords within the series, and why do you actually think this is a thing, basically?
It's the systematic discrimination against women that's pretty inherent in media aimed at boys in general. It is, I think, I look at it in the same sentence as the producer of Kyoryuger, who justified only having one female on the core team by saying that we had to have people who would be believable as strong enough to fight a dinosaur.
And while this goes back into our sexist argument in those regards, I don't ever think, and correct me if you have a different view on this or something, that the female characters are ever thought of as weaker than their male counterparts. But I think there is something in there where there isn't as much interest in the female characters than there is the male characters.
Yes, I would agree. That's the females rarely get the season-defining plots. I'll put it that way.
With the exception of Amy, whose whole plot was falling in love with the hero of the series.
Yeah.
And Raptor, you know, the whole thing is we're not trying to put down the female characters within the series, or even really
No,
put
I'm
down
putting
their
down
Zords.
the people that wrote them.
Yeah, but it's the idea to bring this to attention, because here we are in Ninja, and we have a Pink Ranger and a White Ranger now, and when we compare their Zords, again, we have a train, which is a repeat.
We have a dog and a leftover from Tokyuger.
Exactly. And compared to even the Yellow Ranger's dump truck, which arguably he can run people over with that, which is pretty cool, is still somehow cooler than what the two female characters have, and I am going to bet is probably a little bit more useful.
Yep. So, I think it just comes down to females getting the less cool stuff in these shows in general, which I think is just symptomatic of a larger issue. And I think there are all kinds of things that you can link to this. For example, the fact that we've only had one female 6th Ranger, and she had to share that position with her male brother.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there has only been one Sentai team where females outnumbered males. And that was the unofficial team.
Well, let's also bring up, in addition to Akiba Ranger, there was the Hana Rangers from Kaku Ranger, which, if you guys out there don't know what it was basically a task force of 5 women who were transformed from cats into humans to fight the Kaku Ranger.
Right, but I put them on the same level as the Psycho Rangers, or...
But it was a full team of women who were the enemies in a series which had only one female ranger. So that's also kind of, something's odd going on there.
And, yeah, I'm just going to use a recent example of something I thought of. Abba Ranger. Ranru does not have a major plot arc of her own. And
yeah,
because her arc is ultimately helping out Asuka as he pines over his lost wife Mahoro. And let's look at the Dino Thunder / Abba Ranger mecha. The Pterodactyl Zord / Tera
which is arguably more used than the Pterodactyl Dinozord, because at least the
it's
Pterodactyl
not even
Dinozord...
a blood. Is it? Yeah, the Pterodactyl Dinozord got to be a breastplate
and fire lasers.
This one's a helmet.
Yeah, and they actually had an episode, at least in Dino Thunder, and I'm sure in Abba Ranger 2, where they didn't even need the Yellow Ranger Zord to still form the Megazord.
That was really funny. The guys at Imagination Station had pun. They subbed it as... because the mecha's name is Abarin-O, and they subbed it as Abarin Almost.
The Japanese and their puns. Yes.
Well, that was purely a sub thing.
Well, still. Well, Raptor, I'm going to pose this question to you, because I have an answer that I would like to address. But, in your mind, what needs to happen, you think, for our female characters to actually get cool Zords?
I think it's just a conscious decision to give the female a Zord that is just as cool as the males.
Without basically washing into the others. Because again, with Tokyuger, everybody has trains. So
yeah, they're really
equal.
I think you don't risk washing into other things. I think everyone can have a cool mecha.
But it'll depend on its usefulness, and because again, we have Zords like a submarine, which is great for Gokai Pink.
But let's go back to Magi Ranger for a moment.
Okay.
You could have a fairy or a mecha, but it doesn't have to be a tiny little pixie.
Yeah,
Because it could be like a fairy like Titania. Titania is a large fairy. She could have been the same size as everyone else.
And it's not even about the size, it's about her usefulness. I mean, when you're defining abilities to turn into a ball that everybody else tosses around, again, something's wrong there.
Exactly. It's ultimately an accessory. And that's what a lot of these female mechas end up being. Accessories.
And Raptor, I want to kind of close this out. This could actually go into a completely different conversation, but I pose this. I think one of the things that should be attempted to help with this is make the primary leader and Red Ranger of the team a girl. And I don't mean in the sense of what we got with the Shinken Princess, but I mean from the get-go, she is the leader of the team, and she is given the cool #1 Tyrannosaurus Red Dragon Thunder Zord equivalent. So that maybe if we start that and people enjoy her as the lead protagonist, that maybe that'll change down the line for other female characters.
And I'm going to point out something. As much as people give the Disney era of Power Rangers crap, Disney lobbied Toei to have a female Red Ranger for Sentai.
Which resulted in Charlie.
Because Toei wouldn't give in for Decker Red.
Yes, and of course she turned out to be evil, so small victories here and there, I guess.
Take what you can get.
Yes. But Raptor, I think we've made our point and then some on this discussion, and I just want to go ahead and leave our audience thinking, this is something that has happened. I'm not going to say we need to write angry letters to Toei or Bandai or anything like that, but I think it's something that, as we move forward to the 40th anniversary, or even in Ninja if they get a second set of Zords, which is something we don't see all that often anymore, that they need to start thinking we need to start giving the girls something a little bit more interesting, a little bit cooler than, turtles and pixies.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, Raptor, any other final thoughts you want to bring up?
I'm just saying, give them the mechas that are just as cool. I think that Triceratops is just as cool as a Stegosaurus or a Parasaurolophus. It's not cooler than a Raptor, but that's just a me thing.
All right, then.
I just say more things like that.
Okay. Well,
and even though this was a Power Rangers thing, the female gained the saber-toothed tiger. That's cool.
Yeah, I think that was a step in the right direction, but I also think it was a step in the right direction when they stopped making the male Yellow Rangers female. So, yeah. All right. Well, Raptor, I want to thank you again for joining me. We'll try to bring you on again for another scintillating and thought-provoking topic, whenever that may be.
Yep, I'm always glad to come back when our schedules line up for it.
All right. Well, sounds good. So again, Raptor, thank you for joining us, and everybody, thank you for listening. Have a good evening, and the tavern is now closed.